Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. 40 years ago today, Michael Jordan made his NBA debut. Coby White had a zip-day impression against the Milwaukee Bucks, and a lot more on today's episode of State of the Association.
40 years ago
I'm your host,
today,
Michael Jordan made his NBA debut on October 26, 1984 against Washington. He recorded 16 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 blocks in a win for the Chicago Bulls. That would go on to be the start of one of the greatest rookie seasons that we've ever seen, and perhaps the greatest career in NBA history that we've ever seen. Of course, he would go on to go 6-0 in the finals with Chicago. He would rack up scoring titles year after year. Michael Jordan was a gifted scorer and an elite basketball player, the greatest that we've ever seen. In terms of legacy, Michael Jordan is second to none. He has the highest points per game average in NBA history, and he's pretty high on the scoring leaderboard for a guy who had not the highest longevity in terms of how many years he played in the league. You can make an argument for LeBron James in terms of what he has done on the court as a basketball player. You can make an argument that he is a better basketball player, but in terms of legacy, no one can compare to Michael Jordan. And 40 years ago today, he made his NBA debut. Despite all of the talent that LeBron has as a 6'9" point guard, essentially, right? The reason that he is often not perceived as the GOAT is because Michael Jordan was the one who set the bar for what it means to really be the GOAT. He was undefeated in the finals. He racked up the scoring titles. He won MVPs. He won a Defensive Player of the Year, which is perhaps the one thing that LeBron James has not done. So 40 years ago today, the gold standard in the NBA made their debut. And I'm someone who is fairly high on LeBron in terms of there being a discussion for him to be the GOAT. However, I view it as 1A and 1B. It's more so your opinion in terms of what you look for in a basketball player. And Jordan nearly had it all. So it's just great to kind of look back on how he started on October 26, 1984. And it's just crazy to think that that was 40 years ago now. And we're still having conversations about him being the GOAT because so often now we see so many talented players in the league. There's just unprecedented parity. However, in spite of all the talented players that come in, there has only been one player that has been able to get even close to the level of Michael Jordan as a basketball player, and that is a testament to his legacy in itself. Thank you, Michael Jordan, for your career, and it's great to look back on 40 years ago today. He made his NBA for a second debut. The LA Lakers are now 2-0, once again led by Anthony Davis. He has had an amazing and a dominant start to his NBA season. And AD has always been a great player. He's been borderline top 10 for so many years now. However, the biggest knock on him has always been injuries, and you can't make a statement 2 games into a season like this. However, last year we saw him relatively healthy, and that was one of the best AD seasons that we've seen in years. When AD has the green light and he's able to go out there and play, he really hasn't declined from, what you might perceive as peak AD, whether that's late Pelican stage or 2020 Lakers AD. He really hasn't declined much from that level of play. In some facets, he's better. I think he's one of the best defenders in the league, and it's a crime that he hasn't been a Defensive Player of the Year at least once in his career. This is just an all-time great player. And if I recall correctly, he was one of the guys that caught quite a bit of flack for being on the NBA 75 team over, say, a guy like Dwight Howard. However, I think that he absolutely deserves it. He's been one of the best big men in the league for practically a decade now. And even after being in the NBA for so long, he's still finding ways to go out and dominate. Every year we kind of question if this is the year where LeBron is going to hand over the reins to Anthony Davis. And to start this year, it kind of looks like it. Anthony Davis has absolutely looked like the best player on the Los Angeles Lakers to start off this year. And I tell you what, I would love to see him remain healthy and to try to make a run for MVP, because right now he's playing at an above MVP level. He's absolutely killing it right now, especially with a new 65-game rule. AD's going to have to play a lot of games if he's going to want to be in those conversations to be MVP, to be DPOY. At this level of play, though, if he keeps that up and he plays that many games, I think he could absolutely be in the running. And originally I said MVP was a 2-guard race. I still stand by that. I don't know if AD is going to have the health, but if he does and he continues to play, he looks like one of the top players in the league right now. And it's great to see because this is a guy who really doesn't have many accolades in terms of individual accomplishments, because you have some All-Stars, you have some All-NBA, but in terms of, the big awards like MVP, DPOY, he's only a one-time NBA champion, and that in itself is a team award. He doesn't have any of those for a guy who's one of the top 75 NBA players that we've ever seen. So I would love to see him make a run at MVP, DPOY. He's been one of the best defenders in the league for years now and never got his flowers on that end. That would be great to see. I am here for the Anthony Davis MVP, DPOY campaign. He looks like he has really been handed the torch from LeBron James for this Lakers franchise, and that's great to see because, for the Lakers, it was a question of what's going to happen when LeBron's gone. And you're still going to have that because you can't just replace a guy like that. But in a couple years down the line, if Anthony Davis is able to keep this up, and really he is getting older in age as well. However, he's not on the brink of retirement yet. So if he's able to stay as the number one option for LA and be really good for them in the years to come, that helps make it an easier adjustment period for the Los Angeles Lakers moving forward past LeBron, at least for the next couple of years, because, they, for a time there, they did kind of mortgage their future. So you want to be able to win now with the Lakers roster, even when LeBron's gone. And I think Anthony Davis, the way he's playing right now, he looks like he can be the guy for them. And I have no doubt about if he is able to stay healthy, he absolutely has the potential to be that guy for the Lakers once LeBron is gone. And even right now, the Milwaukee Bucks are now 1-1 after Chicago defeated Milwaukee. We talked about MJ making his debut with the Bulls 40 years ago to this day. Well, the night before, on October 25th, Coby White just put on his best Michael Jordan impression. He had 35 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, 4 steals. It was a great game for him, and I think Coby White is definitively the point guard for the Chicago Bulls moving forward, not just now, but in terms to their long-term future. Obviously, Lonzo Ball is a solid contributing NBA player that can make winning plays constantly, right? But I think the way this team is currently constructed, from everything we've seen for Coby White, whether it was last year's real breakout campaign, I think he should have been the most improved player in the league. Or started this year, Coby White is the guy for the Chicago Bulls. This was someone who took a while to get acquainted to the NBA game. He was a prospect I was fairly high on, but it took him a while to figure it out. He had a solid first couple of years, and then his production and minutes kind of continually declined until last year, where he got back into action, averaged 19 points a game. That was about a 10-point jump from the season before. And now he's carried that over into this season. And it's great to see. I don't think he should win Most Improved Player this year unless he's averaging like 25, just because I think last year was his year to win it. And at this point, it's a shame that we're not going to get to recognize him for it. However, this is Coby White All-Star year, if anything. Forget Most Improved. This is the year where Coby White really proved himself. Because Chicago, you need to commit to the rebuild. You got rid – DeMar DeRozan's gone. Now it's time to get Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic out of here and commit to a new, young era in Chicago. Because you've got guys like Coby White, like Ayo Dosunmu, who really, Dosunmu, in terms of what he does, he's not really that far off from Coby, because Dosunmu is a really solid role player for the Chicago Bulls right now. And Coby, obviously, he's better, but the gap isn't that much in terms of what they can do. I think Dosunmu has a lot of potential. Coby should get the green light, but shout out to Ayo as well. And Ayo's a hometown kid too, so that's great to see. But for this Bulls team, I think you do have a solid young core if you were, especially, in the backcourt, if you were to blow things up. With the Bulls, the biggest issue is kind of being stuck in mediocrity. And you can make an argument that Coby might be too good at this point for them to be in mediocrity once again if they rebuilt around them. But at this point, you do have solid young guys. You don't have to absolutely get the first number 1 overall pick. If you can get some solid, like 5, 6, 7, that kind of area in terms of the draft. Last year was a bad draft, but this coming year it's going to be a lot better. And this was kind of an outlier because in recent years we've seen really hyped up hyped up NBA draft class, and we've seen really talented prospects coming in. So for the Bulls, they're going to be able to get more and more talented guys in later spots compared to this year. So if you are able to get rid of a guy like Zach LaVine, I don't know who's going to take him, right, in terms of a trade, just because of that contract for what he does as a player. But if you are able to move off Zach LaVine, even if Coby White keeps you in, maybe 8 to 10 seeding, and that you can make the argument, the Bulls front office might make the argument that, hey, why don't we just keep Zach if we're going to be stuck in mediocrity anyways? At least, hey, we'll have another good player, right? However, by getting rid of Zach LaVine, that creates opportunities for other guys on that team too. So even if you're in the same position seating-wise, you have a brighter future because you're not holding on to Zach LaVine on contract that's really just not worth his value at this point. So for the Bulls, it's time to rebuild around Coby White, around Iota Sumu, around Matas Buzelis. The future is bright if they are finally to commit to the rebuild right now. The seating might look the same, but the context is so much different. By giving the green light to other guys and not keeping Zach LaVine around, because at this point he kind of has peaked in terms of what we have seen from him. The Hawks are now 2-0 after a great performance from Trae Young. 38 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, 5 threes made. But the thing I want to highlight here, 4 steals. This is a guy who you can't argue with the offensive production. You can make an argument a little bit about the efficiency, but in terms of what he puts up on a nightly basis, he is one of the best offensive engines in the entire NBA. However, the issue in years past has been that he's kind of been a little bit of a traffic cone on defense. But I would argue that for the first time in his career, last year he was a little bit more of, he narrowed the gap a little bit between being a below average defender and being a serviceable one. And I think having 4 steals and a win against the Charlotte Hornets is another example of that. Now, obviously, stats aren't the best metric for defense, right? Because, sure, if a guy gets a lot of blocks, gets a lot of steals, you can kind of quantify that and say, hey, this guy's a good defender. But in general, it's the eye test. And Trae Young, he, at the bare minimum, has been putting in more effort on the defensive end over the start of this season and last year. And that's really all you can ask from him, because physically he's 6'1", he's on the skinny end, so you just need him to put in the effort on the defensive end, especially because you rely on him to carry your offensive load so much too. So him just being not a net negative, that's huge for the Atlanta Hawks and for Trae Young's value as a player. So I thought this game against the Charlotte Hornets was great for him because we've seen the offensive reduction, but we need him to be a little bit better defender for him to truly be a top player in this league, because that's always been the negative. You can have all this offense, but guess what? What happens if you give those points up right back on the other end of the floor? However, I think this 125-120 win against Charlotte, that was a great sign for him moving forward, because you've also got good defensive players around him as well. Obviously, the DeJounte Murray thing didn't work out, and they really tried to work him into more of an offensive role. That didn't work out too well for him alongside Trae Young, but you've got guys like Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, they can defend. And Johnson's a good wing defender as well, so he's able to make up for some of the perimeter lapses of Trae Young. I think if you can properly build around Trae Young, with him having improved effort on the defensive end, you can really build around Trae Young. I think he should stay in Atlanta for a while if they are able to put a solid team around him. I think the sky is the limit for Atlanta. Are they going to win it all this year? No. I don't view them as a contender, but I think that they are a fun team to watch for sure. And it's just Trae Young's improvement year by year that's going to keep them that way, on the defensive end especially. 38-10, that's a great offensive performance, but what I'm most keyed on is that defensive effort. That's what we need to see from While they lost, the Charlotte Hornets, LaMelo Ball looks like a star for them right now. And in the past couple of years, we've kind of seen the same thing where he puts up really good production, but then he goes and gets injured. And that could happen again this year as well. But if you are able to build around LaMelo Ball and he's able to stay somewhat healthy, you have your answer at the point guard position, no doubt. I was never super high on him as a prospect, but I can't argue with what he has done. He had 9 threes last night and over 30 points. It was a great game from LaMelo Ball. And the thing about him is he's a good playmaker for others, a good passer, because he's able to set others up for success as well. Sure, he's flashy, but it's not a selfish style of basketball necessarily. He's able to get other guys involved, and that's good for the development of a guy like Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, and him and Miles Bridges. They had a really good lob game going. As long as LaMelo's been healthy and he's on the court with Miles Bridges, they have really good chemistry together. So LaMelo, for his flaws as a prospect, he is able to make up for that because not only is he in it for himself, he is able to elevate others. And it took me a while to come around to him, but also with the Hornets, there's a distinct difference between their records when LaMelo is healthy versus when he's not. Because when he's healthy, they are an around 500 team, and when he's not, they're one of the bottom teams in the league. And obviously, being around a 500 team isn't the best spot for you to be. However, it shows that at the bare minimum, LaMelo Ball can raise your floor. And for Charlotte at this point, in terms of your franchise's history, that's about as much as you can ask for. Your best player of all time is Kemba Walker, and I love Kemba. But, that's kind of lacking compared to some other teams, and you just haven't had much source success. So for Mel to even be a floor raiser, that's amazing. And if he's able to stay healthy, not only is he going to have a great year himself, he's going to be able to set up other guys to have great years too. And it's going to be amazing for the development of guys like B-Mill and Mark Williams. So it's great to see LaMelo Ball back and healthy and elevating not just himself, but others. Last topic and here, I want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets. They are now 0-2, and it just doesn't look like they have a very bright future in the league with the way that this roster is currently set up. Not just do they have, not very many exciting young prospects to go and watch, but they don't have a win now team either. So you're not building towards the future, but you're not also building a team that's going to win right now. I love Dennis Schroeder as a player, but he's more of, Germany's guy than he is Brooklyn in terms of, the NBA. FIBA Schroeder is different, but in the NBA, he's more of an average to stable point guard, veteran mentor at this point, but he's not going to elevate you to championship contention, right? And Cam Thomas, it's great that he gets the green light over there, but he still has work to do in terms of his efficiency. And for the rest of this team, Nick Claxton, I think, as well, is a solid center. But a lot of this team, right, is just good role players. But the issue is that you don't have a guy to elevate that team of role players. And the role players aren't that young either. Like, if it was a lot of guys who had potential to be valuable assets for whether it was the Brooklyn Nets or in a trade with another team, that would be a different story. But guys like Cam Johnson, they're not getting any younger. Dorian Finney-Smith, DFS is 31. So you have role players who aren't going to get any better at this point. They're not going to, really take the helm on the offensive end or anything like that and be the guy to lead your team in the future. No. And you don't have very many young, exciting prospects. You've got Cam Thomas, but at this point, he's not a winning NBA player. So you're not going to win now, but you don't have much to build towards in the future. So the Nets are in just a bad situation. And they gave up a lot of assets for that big three of KD, Harden, and Kyrie, and that led to nowhere as well. So this team, you're just kind of stuck in purgatory, and you can't do much about it. I think you could probably get some value for Dennis Schroeder. I think he could be a really good player on a championship team. Not to the level of Drew Holiday, of course, but in the same kind of vein of that as a culture changer and a guy at the point guard position who can lock in on the defensive end, and not take up too much of a role on the offense. I think he could be a very valuable guy for a championship team, but how much is the team really going to give up for Dennis Schroeder at this point? And it's the same thing with all of those role players. And for Nick Claxton, from what we've seen from him, right, in terms of developing an offensive game and being more aggressive on offense, he's in a good situation to do that because the Nets don't have a lot of guys like that, but he really hasn't. So this one, I don't know what the ceiling for Claxton is. And Cam Thomas, once again, he's another guy, and he is aggressive with the ball. However, he's still got a lot to refine in his game. So the Nets, they don't have much to build towards as a young core, and they also aren't going anywhere right now. So they're just stuck in perhaps one of the worst situations in the entire league. And it's a shame to see because I'm a fan of some of those guys on that team. However, I can understand that they're in a real bad situation right now, and the Brooklyn Nets are not going anywhere, and they've just kind of put themselves into a corner. And it's going to be hard to get out. Episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, feel free to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, follow. If you're on Spotify, because this podcast, I'm trying to get it to a point where it can eventually be a viable option for me to realistically continue to do in terms of, funding for things like interviews, because I can't get all those free, right? And stuff like that. I want to make this podcast as good as it can be. I also want to create thought-provoking questions for a large NBA audience. And it's going to take time to get there for sure. But if you could hit us with a follow, hit us with a subscription, however you might do that, if you could find the time to do that, that would be great. But as of now, I'm not going to ask for much more. Thank you for tuning in. This is State of the Association. I hope you enjoyed. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.